Oh, sorry, I thought I had it.
That's fine. Okay. And Phil, you want to start us off on this?
Absolutely. So I just wanted to thank everyone for joining us tonight. It's really great to have everyone here joining us for a monthly webinar. UUJEC is a progressive organization focused on ensuring economic justice for all. As such, UUJEC envisions a world that sustains all living beings, where all people can share the riches of the planet, and where all voices are heard. A key part of this also is recognizing the inherent worth and dignity of every person is recognized and affirmed as set forth in the UU principles. UUJEC carries out this work grounded in UU principles by engaging, educating, and activating UUs. And a really key part of this work that we do on a monthly basis are these monthly webinars. So we're really glad that you're all able to join us tonight. Tonight's webinar is a public bank for New Jersey, countering Wall Street dominance. We're fortunate to be joined by Joan Bartle and Walt McCree, who are experts on this topic and are co-directors of Banking on New Jersey. Banking on New Jersey seeks to bring the value of a municipally owned bank to New Jersey, and envisions this bank as a public institution managed professionally, guided by strong citizen oversight, and accountable to the public as its only stockholders. Over the course of this evening's webinar, Joan and Walt, who have been leading the effort to establish a public bank in New Jersey, will be sharing about public bank campaigns across the nation. Thank you very much, Joan and Walt, for joining us tonight. And just one last thing as a brief comment on format. Joan and Walt will present for about 20 minutes before the conversation will be opened up for a Q&A session. And we ask that everyone please hold their questions until the Q&A session, unless Joan and Walt request otherwise during the presentation. Thank you again, and with that, I'll turn it over to you now, Joan and Walt, so we can hear from you rather than me. So thank you again for joining us tonight.
All right. Well, thank you very much. And since we all know Joan is around here somewhere.
You can hear me, right?
Yes.
There
Okay.
she is.
Okay.
Thank you so much for inviting us and sharing this opportunity. We're delighted to be with the UUs. You may know that around the country that the UUs, as we fondly call this community, have been very active in this department, in this topic. And they've really been leadership at the leadership level in the West Coast, particularly. So, Joan is one as well. So, is a part of that community, has been for years and years in Princeton.
Decades.
That's very nice. I very much appreciate this. Now, just as background for who we are, the Banking on New Jersey is a volunteer citizens group. We just put this forward as part of our commitment to social justice, and toward the power and the potential, really the exciting prospects of being able to reclaim the money power for public policy, for public interest. As you know, all of our not all of our money, but the money that we need, often that's not covered by taxes, which is a substantial amount, is borrowed, typically from the bond market, which is a private capital enterprise, which means that their bottom line is profit. And the purpose of a public bank is banking in the public interest. Now, there are all kinds of banks, and I'm going to tell you, we're going to describe what a public bank is in just a moment. I'll just let you know also that our background in this includes having had the pleasure to have being at a picnic with Phil Murphy back before he ran for governor, as he was still considering, and we asked him if he had ever heard of a public bank, and that started a conversation which resulted in us consulting with his staff and getting him on board with that, and then of course running and now winning, and actually in the process making New Jersey one of the more exciting and one of the most potent front lines for public banking around the country. It has been a citizen-driven effort around the country, and it's what we've noticed through a variety of about 35 or 40 different initiatives is that you come up to a point in the process of the political process where having people at the top matters. You know that the grassroots are absolutely necessary, and this is where that's where some of the power is. But it's, you know, power from the ground up. But also we have a push and a pull in New Jersey, and I think we're going to see that in other places around the country as well, because the idea of public banking is growing rapidly. So basically, public banking addresses the fundamental problem of unsustainable debt borrowing from private sources. This is, we'll talk a little bit later on in this presentation about the ways in which Wall Street dominance has overrun our democracy, public policy, and has also put us on an unsustainable track of borrowing and debt and so forth. So let me share my screen here now with you to just if I find it. There we go. I think you should be able to see this. Do you see Banking on New Jersey?
Yep.
Okay, great. Well, obviously that's us. And this what I call the bicycle graphic shows you the situation that we've got now. We have two circles, one of which is not really a circle. If you consider the wheels, you can see how the structural design of this is unsustainable and doesn't work. On the left-hand side, we have our current system, which is the private banking system. And the flow indicates, of course, that the money comes from citizens, our taxes and so forth, goes to our state and municipal governments, which, because they don't have a bank, have to put it in deposit it in a commercial bank, typically large banks, Wall Street banks, because often commercial banks, community banks are not large enough or are unable to collateralize the size of the deposits that the state and municipal governments require. So that money goes to Wall Street. And as you may or may not know, when you put your money in a bank, the bank legally owns it. It's the bank's money. They have a promise, or at least they say they're going to pay it back to you, and they generally do, thanks to FDR. We have the FDIC, which stands behind $250,000 of deposits, but above that, you know, your other things could happen. And as we've seen in 2008, when the global financial collapse occurred, there was an awful big mess to try to resubstantiate or rebalance the books of the big banks. And what do they do with that money? Wall Street takes your money and they pay us, you know, for deposits about 1%. Used to be a little bit less than that, given the way the interest rates were. But that money that's what we get back and we also pay them to manage that money. So they go on to gamble it, and in whatever ways, in variety of ways, through the various secondary markets, speculative markets that they play in. And so, and that provides profits for them, and for us, not so much. The returns are very meager. So the public banking smarter system, as we call it, on the right side shows you how the money flows and completes a cycle. Our taxes go to our government deposits those taxes and all fees and so forth into the state bank. The state bank then invests and lends into the local or state economy rather than putting it on the global, in the global casino, corporate bonds and foreign currencies and a variety of other speculative ventures. It doesn't go there. All of the money is put into the local economy in the form of low-cost lending for municipalities to do infrastructure and you know, to be able to provide bonding at a lower cost, and a host of other, you know, affordable housing, the things that the bank has a mission to serve. Now, and then of course that local economy comes back to the citizens in the form of multiplied values. The Stockton University study by Dr. Feigert, it showed that for every $1 million put in through new credit through a bank, it will generate $1.5 to $2 million in net return, and also create, let's see, 6 to 9 per dollar. So, you know, thousands of jobs would result from that level of investment. And so the cycle, and so what that does is helps to stabilize the state economy and the local economies by investing in those systems and services that we right now are hard pressed to serve. The choices that we have now are bleak. That is to say, we can't afford our transit, we can't afford our infrastructure, our schools are deteriorating, et cetera, et cetera. So the needs are great, and I think we could all make our own list of favorites, but our ability to service those needs are really limited because we have to borrow the money as opposed to lending it to ourselves. Now, I'll wrap up my section here and let Joan talk for a minute about what some of the specific examples are. But the idea of lending to ourselves comes from how banks work. A bank has a capital nest egg that it doesn't spend, that it remains there, but it can leverage its capital assets ninefold. This is all theoretical. I mean, it's kind of like the Bank of Oil, but a lot of the big banks leverage themselves are way over leveraged. But the point is that we can leverage your equity into new resources, new credit. So you're able to provide credit more cost effectively, and then of course direct it where you want to go. All right. So what are the benefits of a public bank for the state of New Jersey? And here, I'd like to hand this over to Joan to tell us a little bit about these things.
Well, thanks, Walt. And I've lost everything on Zoom, but you can still hear me, so I will proceed.
Okay.
So really looking at an overview and a summary and some of the things that a public bank for New Jersey can do. One is to generate new non-tax revenues for the state. So a public bank for New Jersey would not be a retail bank. But it would be a municipal bank that would take the state's tax money as deposits. So there would be no retail branches, no ATMs or advertising and marketing with all that cost that's associated with it. So it would be just basically one deposit customer, the state, which would deposit our tax money, as I said. This would lower debt costs for school districts and local governments is another benefit. So a public bank could loan directly to school districts and local governments, either for capital or infrastructure projects, just as they do in North Dakota. So the savings will be substantial over the traditional bond market, the bond issues, with lower interest rates and the elimination of fees and commissions and all the machinations of the bond market. Another benefit, and very important, is that it would strengthen the local banks and the credit unions. The strength and the numbers and survivorship of banks in North Dakota is just remarkable. There were no bank failures during the downturn. Plus, they had the nation's lowest mortgage defaults per capita during the entire financial crisis. And I can quote the B&D Charter. One of the parts is, quote, to be helpful to and to assist in the development of North Dakota banks. This is one of the pushbacks we get from the banking industry because they don't understand. They hear the word bank and they hear competition, but it's actually the opposite of competition. A public bank in New Jersey could purchase local bank stock. They would partner with the local banks on larger loans and providing secondary market for mortgages. So it's really a big support for community banks and would actually strengthen the local banking industry, especially at a time when the federal government is encouraging bank consolidation. We really need more banks to serve people. Another benefit would be for small businesses. Everything is large today, large corporations. There was an ad for a bank in our local market here in Princeton that said, we're lending money, $500,000 or more. Well, people don't need 500,000. Small businesses need 25,000 or 75 or 50,000. So this would be an opportunity to support small businesses. A very nice bonus. Student loans is another popular topic and can be as part of the mission to support student loans in New Jersey with lower interest rates and longer terms, less onerous. There's several varieties, and I haven't checked the latest, but it was like 2% instead of the 6 and 7% that that people are paying today. So there's some of the benefits of a public bank and what it can do for New Jersey.
All right, thanks, Joan. And the list kind of goes on for there.
It does.
Yeah. And of course, we'll talk perhaps in questions. But one aspect here, and this kind of goes back to an earlier theme about what does Wall Street cost New Jersey? Wall Street, being the dominant player in our municipal and government finance, has a huge cost. And I think, as you see in this graphic here, that democracy is tied up in back of and locked in by the global financial cartel, which is an international group of financiers and financialists who are now deeply involved and invested in stock markets and in governments. And so what it costs just in a general way, in New Jersey, the state debt is the debt service. Debt service costs us $4.1 billion every year. Every year. Now you can imagine what $4 billion would do for the state budget. But you can tell when you read Tom Moran's articles or Sheila Reynoldsen's from the New Jersey policy perspective, that they laud the governor's cutting back on expenses, but they have no alternative to say, how are we going to get the new funds that we need to build the industries that we need to revive our infrastructure and so forth. It is an unsustainable downward cycle of debt and taxes. And what the bank does, as you saw from that circle diagram, is that by investing in the state economy, it stabilizes and improves and maximizes and actually reverses. It's counter-cyclical, as they say in the industry. It reverses the process so that, and because some of the fund is virtually free funding insofar as in this way. In a bonding sequence, you go to the market to see what the market will give you. Your credit rating, which is now, New Jersey's in the tank. It's the second lowest credit rating in the country. So they will charge us whatever they can get away with. And not only will they charge us for the money, they will charge us for the underwriting, the legalese that goes with it, et cetera, et cetera. And so those interests and fees mount and compound every year. So that is clearly unsustainable. With a public bank, if the bank is large enough, and New Jersey's bank could certainly be substantial, we would be able to do things like this. If in North Dakota, which is the only place there is a public bank at the moment in the United States, they provide municipal loans for 2% for 30 years. Now, that's just not something that a commercial bank would want to get into, okay? Nor would they want to necessarily fund some of the projects that the people need. So we take that 2% and you compare it with what the cost of a bond would be. I think the governor's $500 million bond is probably going to cost 5%, maybe more. So you look at the savings between 2% and 5%, you see you've got a margin already of 3%. But the real kicker here is that you pay the interest to yourself. So not only do you save money on the funding of your needs, but you're actually creating more equity for yourself at the bank, which grows the capital capability of the bank to generate more lending. The whole idea here is to create affordable lending and also to not let our money, out of the state or out of town. We want to hold onto our resources. So that's the logic of it. And I think when you look at the simple fact of how it works, what Joan and I always hear is that, why do we have that now? And of course, the answer for that is that the reason that we don't have it now is that the Wall Street impact is ubiquitous all over the country. And as we move this public banking initiative and agenda around the country, we're addressing it and finding it very much intact and very much in our way. However, the people really are rising in new ways, creative and powerful, intelligent and strategic ways to move this thing forward. And I think we're going to see that public banking will soon be adopted as a necessary element. So that is a thumbnail sketch of what public banking is. This graphic, Banking on New Jersey, certainly says a lot about what it's all about. The common sense of keeping our money at home to invest in ourselves for the sake of the commonwealth and the common good. This is something that we have to be responsible for ourselves. And you know that community interest is not the same as profiteering interest, as Wall Street interests. So if anybody's going to do it, it's going to have to be us. And we're fortunate to be able to have a government and a very progressive environment at the moment to be able to move this forward. So with that, I think I've stopped right on the 20-minute mark. We have, and I think it's time for questions, if there are any.
Okay, I'll start. How does this relate to like the Federal Reserve and the other states and federal institutions?
How does it relate to other institutions?
Well, I know it relates as a support to the local banks, but to outside the borders.
Well, outside the borders would be the Federal Reserve and the FDIC and the Federal Home Loan Bank are all large national agencies that help to stabilize the banking industry. They're not always effective at that, as we know, but any chartered bank, and this would presumably be a chartered bank, would want to participate with the Federal Reserve, at least by being able to have borrowing rights, because you can, as a chartered bank, you can borrow very cost effectively to help with your bank liquidity. The FDIC is kind of an unnecessary consideration insofar as municipal and state deposits are much larger, but there are other ways to secure the deposits of the bank. In North Dakota, again, the only public bank, which is now 100 years old next year, their money is underwritten by the full faith and credit of the state. So they don't have FDIC insurance, and I think that's a useful model for us to consider, and it is one that is being considered around the country. Now, Sally, if I can go inside the borders for a moment,
Sure.
To also address what it does for the state agencies. Mm-hmm. New Jersey already has an economic development authority, and it has housing authorities, and it has transit and infrastructure authorities, all of which need money at some point and have to go to the markets to find it, mortgage centers and so forth. The public bank, it then becomes yet another avenue or channel in which the state can solve a financing problem. And I think that's enormously important from a managerial standpoint, but it's tremendously exciting from a standpoint of, well, what else can we do with our money? If we're going to be paying ourselves and making a profit, a sustainable operating profit, then by funding our infrastructure or in school needs, we've got a very nice little financial engine, a monetary engine that is just the same as any other bank. It does exactly what any other bank does. It makes money out of nothing. You know, it creates credit from nothing, but leverage on its equity. And the equity of the state of New Jersey is substantial. And when you look at the CAFRs, the comprehensive annual financial reports of this state, show that there are billions of dollars that are now currently either underinvested or underutilized that could be redeployed for the purpose of capitalizing the bank and also providing depository flow. I could go on, but I'm not going to go on. if that's clear. Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
What's happening in other states around the country?
That's a great question, and it's again, I could give you a really long answer. Let me try to be brief. California, as you might expect, is really engaged here, as are the other West Coast states. In part initiated, we've had operational relations with the state treasurers and others with Public Banking Institute, but now it's really gotten into a very exciting drama, driven in part by the interest of the cannabis industry. Cannabis banking, as you may know, is not something that is possible under the current legal framework because it's a Schedule I drug. But we all know that New Jersey's got it in mind, our administration and about 26 other states are all moving in the direction of legalizing it. Where do you put the money? California, Oregon, Washington, Colorado, and others have been looking at a public bank as a possible location or as a possible way to do that. Frankly, we're not moving in that direction from our own thinking. We think that the feds are going to have to work that out first. But what they are doing, the citizens in Los Angeles, San Francisco, Oakland, Richmond, Berkeley, Santa Cruz, Santa Rosa, the Humboldt and Mendocino counties are all are all looking at creating the public bank. So they're starting to do some feasibility studies and some analyses. In Los Angeles, which is a charter county, a city and county, the whole city council has voted in favor of moving forward with the process. In Washington state, there is the state Senate has a caucus that is almost the majority of votes there, and they have a business plan in the works and a feasibility study that they reviewed or finished in December. The city of Seattle and Tacoma are both on board with are moving in that direction. In Colorado, the state has had an initiative that didn't work, but that is because of legislative and also constitutional issues. I'm going to just stop there, but other states that are actively involved are New Mexico, Arizona, Massachusetts, New Hampshire, Vermont, Maine, Maryland, Pennsylvania, and Philadelphia, among others, but and Michigan as well, and Alaska and Hawaii. Okay, but you know, and by the way, also Minnesota has got an initiative for a public bank. That one's built around wanting to provide credit for the funding of agriculture, which, by the way, is one of the things that New Jersey could do. Is depending upon how we design the bank, we've got urban needs and we have rural needs, and they're both distinct. I know this group probably is very concerned about the economic justice issues of housing and jobs and environmental security and safety. Well, these are all things that must be addressed that can't probably be satisfied with the taxes. We're going to have to do something new. That leads me to the discussion of mission, because when you start a bank, a public bank, you want to say, well, what is the mission? What do we want to accomplish? And it is with the grassroots, the ground up sort of declaration of our intention to serve and create an agency to address these things, the bank can take that shape. Have I exhausted you?
So this is Jerry Freed. I have a few questions for you, and I guess let me just sort of throw them all out, and then you could decide which is best to answer. I understand that Dick Cody and Nia Gill introduced a public banking bill a while back, which is not highly regarded by some advocates for a public bank. So I was curious what the status of that bill is, and then also which organizations are actively lobbying for a state bank, and then also what the banking industry, which obviously is the only real significant force on its own, which is against this, what the stick that they have that they would threaten people with, outside of not contributing to their campaigns and such. I mean, what's the, and I'm not talking about the rationality for it. I understand that it's a purely rational and likely a really positive thing for the common good, but I'm just talking about what banks would threaten legislators with, and what their power is.
Thanks, Jerry. And Joan, jump in here if you like. The Cody-Gill bill that came out in January was a very encouraging step as we saw it, because we thought that, well, we figured that the governor is on the case and moving it through. But as Jerry said, that is not a favorite bill. It's not bad, but there are numerous things about it that we would prefer to see improved. Not the least of which is that it's not as focused on New Jersey benefit as it could be, and that it needs to have stronger governance frame architecture, so that the people are part of the process of oversight, that there is complete transparency and accountability, that the appointments and the separation from the political and special interests are improved. Those are all concerns, but I think that it is the Senate bill. We are not aware of any movement on that. In the House, there has not been a bill yet, but there's been some discussion about it. I think that what we know from the administration is that they've been very busy, focused on the initial setting up their administration and doing what they needed to do to get started, the budget and all of that. And of course, Phil has been really busy changing some matters, which I think we all appreciate. But where they're going to go and how it's going to look at this point, I don't have any more certain things as far as legislative news to report. I will say that we're working with the banking department, the treasurer, to review some of the challenges that are there and some of the opportunities as well. In other words, I mean, might it be possible or necessary for the state legislature to create some provisions for special chartering provisions for the state bank? What kind of constitutional changes, if any, need to be made? I suspect none, hopefully none. But I think that the legislative process, the sausage-making process, has yet to begin, and I think that is going to be a very exciting one. Now, your other question, Jerry, about organizations supporting it is a nice segue, because that process of creating the bank is very important, that citizens groups like the UUs, like what you guys are doing, combines with other citizens who understand what the bank is, what the potential, what the prospects are, and how it can be done, and stand unified for a legislative initiative where we stand together. So we all know our respective interests, whatever they may be, are the silos that allow the powers that be, the Wall Street policymakers, to separate us. Our strength is together. So to your question, Jerry, some of the groups that are supporting it, are actively engaged, include the Working Families, the Work Environment Council, NJEA has also been behind it, Citizens Action, the NCAA, Blue Wave, a host of progressive and I guess primarily Democratic agency organizations have been. There are more, but that's a sampling that I can give you off the top of my head. Maybe Joan remembers some others.
Well, the Green Party, for instance, is very much in favor, as well as a whole list of unions, from the CWA to the
SEIU,
all of many of the
USW,
very much in favor, because they see the value of keeping money and jobs in the state, and ensuring that our money is put to use in the state, and not so much being sent out to manage the pensions, as well as to to pay that $4.1 billion on $33 billion worth of bonds. So it's easily supported by people across the spectrum, and as Walt said, they're mostly Democratic organizations, but Republicans, Green Party, Independents see the value.
the Tea Party.
Break it down, and the Tea Party. Break it down to the simplicity that it really is of keeping our money at home instead of Wall Street. And we don't have to bash Wall Street, because all we have to do is say Wall Street and people bash it themselves, if you will. The stories are endless, as you know.
Yeah, I think it is very interesting when we talk about silo collaboration and conflation, perhaps. The Tea Party were early supporters of this. And why? Because they're very good Republican conservative principles. I don't know if those two go together all the time, but the idea of self-reliance, independence from Wall Street and Washington, and that whole theme of not being spendthrifts, not wasting your money. So around the country, leadership, legislative leadership in New Hampshire, Michigan, Alaska, some in Arizona, have all been Tea Party initiatives. So it's a very exciting thing, because I think we all understand that we're getting our act together. I say we, I mean we the people, and to the extent that we can find ways to collaborate above the partisan divide would be great. Let me go back to Jerry's last point or question about banking. What experience have we had with the blockage from the banking industry? As Joan said earlier, I think that no one in that industry, at least in the leadership part of the industry, likes the idea of competition. And they perceive it as competition. So when we talked about having a state bank, they came up with all kinds of, and they will continue to come up with all kinds of things about the state will bankrupt, or the state bank will bankrupt us, and we'll be stuck with bad loans, and it'll go down in flames, etc. And that's all understandable. But I think that because they want to protect their turf, this is in fact a very direct sort of a strategic confrontation with the power of private capital over public interest. But what they have, and we've met with one of the head guys of the New Jersey State Bankers Association, and made some pretty clear data-based points about why this is a great idea for the community banks of New Jersey to get on board. And I said, look, we would like you to be at the table. We want you to be involved in helping to design this bank in a way that will support and nurture the community banks and credit unions of New Jersey. Why? Because, as Joan said, Wall Street is not lending to small businesses. And Wall Street is not interested in funding a lot of the things that we need. Wall Street's very expensive. And Wall Street's influence in the political process is overbearing. But in North Dakota, the community, and of course, the thread I wanted to get here is that the consolidation of community banks around the country has been a real detriment for the fabric of our economy. Community banks are shrinking by the thousands in the last 10, 15 years. So, as you probably well know in your neighborhoods, community banks that are now part of a larger machine, a larger entity, which means that the ability to get credit is removed from local determination. local relationship banking, which is what community banks used to pride themselves on. In North Dakota, that's not true. Around the country, the average amount of deposits that are held by the major banks is over 80%. Wells, Bank of America, Citi, you name all the big guys, and they've got over 80% of the business. The community banks and credit unions, 17, 15, 17, 18%. In North Dakota, it's 180 degrees. They have more community banks per capita than anywhere in the country. Their banks are stronger and more profitable. Their community banks make about 3 times as much as the average community bank here. And they do not lose market share to the big banks. As a result, all of the lending that's done, most of the lending that's done in North Dakota keeps that money in the state. That's a huge substantive difference from what we're doing by sending our money to New York. Love New York, but I'm talking about Wall Street, and this is about keeping it at home. And so what happens is that when the collapse of 2008 came along, where lending to businesses of all sizes dropped 70 to 90%, where businesses no longer had the means to invest in new product, new employees, and so forth. Jobs were lost by the millions, therefore houses were lost. It's that we're all familiar with that picture. Not in North Dakota. Nothing. The lending did not stop there. And it was because the public bank, and not for the first time, by the way, in North Dakota, the public bank stood with the banks and continued to their relationship of partnering for the needs of the state and the communities. So how it works, just as an example. Let's say that there's an auto dealership that wants to expand, and they go to the local bank, and the guy says, and the client says, the customer says, Jim, I need $15 million to build this new thing, this new expanded showroom. Can you help me out? And the banker, his friendly banker, with whom he's had a relationship for years, says, wow, I looked at your business plan, makes a lot of sense, but really we can't go that deep. We don't have that kind of capital. But he said, well, I've got to go. I'll just have to go to a bigger bank. And so don't do that. Let me call Bismarck and see if the public bank will partner with us on that. So they'll send, the local bank will send the paper and the business plan up to Bismarck. They'll check the paper and the credentials and all that stuff. In other words, doubly vet the asset quality, which is fundamental to safe banking. And then find ways to partner if everything's good. And ways to do that, as Joan said, they buy stock in the local bank, they can put capital in the bank, or they can buy down the interest rate. So that flexibility allows the state to retain its ownership. All right. So Jerry, I went on there a little bit, but you get the idea. Basically, the challenge is that they don't understand the opportunity, and they don't want to understand the opportunity because it looks like a threat to them. And I think that all we can do is continue to reach out and have discussions with them, and as we intend to do, to bring the bankers on board. Now, we've talked to New Jersey bankers who said, this sounds great. I thought it was competition, but now that you tell me about it, I like it. So it gives them a partnering capability that they don't have. So did that get you, Jerry?
Yeah, that was great. I guess I would just add a question about, again, implementation of this. Whether there is a real plan for advocacy. And I should say I talked to Dan Fatton this morning, and that's where I've learned a little bit about that. I talked with Les Leopold, over the course of a couple of years. So I feel like I have a sense about how logical this is, and I'm sure every UU that we would ask, they'd be way in favor of it. So the real question is whether there's an advocacy plan, because I heard Murphy talking about it on the campaign trail, but it's really not anything with logical. There's a lot of logical advocates, but outside of the partners that you talked about, communication workers and unions and others, I mean, those are really good, but my understanding is that a lot of those groups are focusing on the minimum $15 minimum wage right now,
Mm.
and maybe we'll get to this later. So the question is there a plan to transition to it, or
Well,
is that waiting for development?
yeah,
Well,
no, I
I
would
was
say,
going to ask you, Jerry, if what has to happen to have the UU Social Justice or Economic and Social Justice committees adopt this as part of their platform.
I mean, that
Come to our
sounds
meeting on
great.
October 20th and talk about it.
Yeah,
Summit.
I mean, I do think that would be great. You know, to have this. I mean, this has kind of been on my radar for a while, but you know, as you know, it's not like the sexiest political issue right now. Although when people learn more about it, it comes up quite a few notches.
Jan and Les are two of our favorite colleagues, and of course Dan speaks. Both of them speak powerfully to this as an agenda item for their organizations. But I think, Jerry, the strategy needs to be brought together. I know Citizen Action has got a number of organizations, and it has an agenda rather all its own. We're kind of mystified about what it is, but we would hope that at some point we would be able to unify these things. And I would just say too, we've spent a good bit of time with legislators and mayors like Ras Baraka and the former mayor of Trenton and the mayor of Bridgeton, New Jersey, who was the president of the League of Municipalities. All of those conversations and freeholders and so forth, we want to get everybody to understand and then to say, yeah, we're going to get on with this. We need this. And so I think the time is approaching very near where we need to sit together and figure out how we're going to tie this together. I don't think it should be difficult. All of our causes, whether it's affordable housing, environmental justice, economic justice, all revolve around money. So we are automatically conjoined with common interest. So let's work together on figuring a way forward, because we do have the leads, we do have the connections to work, and I think the politicians are going to need to see this. When it gets into the legislature, it's going to be really important for us to have our act together. Yeah. Anyone else?
How, we know in New Jersey, we're known sadly for some political corruption. How do you design this so that those who say, oh, but this, you know, these politicians are just going to grab this money and spend it on their pet project. They can't do that.
Yeah. Well, you know, public institutions have their vulnerabilities. However, there are ways that business have been done in the past, which could be easily jettisoned by designing in a governance structure architecturally that prevent the connections between the sources and the channels of influence. That's one way. Now, I mean, that is to say, we have a couple of arm lengths distance between the people who are appointed and the lending, the loans that are made. The bank needs to be run professionally by bankers, not politicians, owned by the state, but not run by the state. The advisory board or the board of directors would certainly include the treasurer and other state representatives, but they would also include stakeholder interests from the public. There would be the transparency and accountability can be designed in by law about the visibility of the loans that are being made. The mission of the bank itself will define the framework or the parameters for lending, so that, for example, you don't be doing derivatives and CDOs and swaps. You don't be doing that. And that's one of the things we had a problem with. That initial bill didn't clarify that. The lending needs to be completely for New Jersey's interest in a demonstrable, verifiable interest. Now, I think there's an exciting opportunity here in this, especially for New Jersey, because of that. I mean, the people who are bringing up the bottom of the ladder in state financing is Illinois, and Chicago has got as much of a problem as New Jersey. But here's the opportunity: when we look at the integrity of our public institutions and the clarity and commitment of the citizens to insist on creating the kind of a legacy institution that can last for years because of the way it is designed and because it is removed from those influences. I think we have the opportunity to position and create something new in New Jersey that has certainly been done in a variety of our agencies. We count on our agencies to do all kinds of things. We may not like the transit thing so far, and some of our bridges might be threatened. But look, this is us, and this is a democracy. We have to start to have a whole new level of responsibility. And I think that's the age that we're in. So that's my point. Let's create a legacy institution around the New Jersey State Bank that measures up to the intentions and the aspirations of its people.
I'm thinking back to the founding of NJ Transit when it was a showpiece, and now we've got a opaque political appointed board that, as part of the Lackawanna Coalition, we keep begging, get a rider on that board.
Yeah.
The highway board without a motorist.
Yeah, I think that, I totally get that. And of course, we have a new administration, and I believe that they're credible, and I definitely think that they got their heads screwed on straight, and they are committed. I think that Phil's, the governor, has made a great start. Now, look, I'd also want to point out that the Bank of North Dakota, as I mentioned before, is 100 years old. Yeah. Yes, they're Norwegians. Yes, they're in the desperate flats of North Dakota. But we have seen public institutions operate, and again, we count on them. I think we're totally up to the task. We're going to renew this state in a lot of different ways. This would be a very exciting platform from which we could do it.
Some of these folks here from other states want to ask anything that's not New Jersey specific? Because
well, I would just like to say that for more information, the resources are considerable, and you could go to the first of all, you can come to bankingonnewjersey.org. And there you'll find some late articles and some interviews and discussions that are part of the TV show that we do called Bank Solution. That's on Vimeo. And then I co-host a program with Ellen Brown, which is carried on the Progressive Radio Network, but also available through a podcast where you can hear us talking about banking trends, and also the global financial aspects, which I think are of textual interest, if not intellectual interest. That's called It's Our Money with Ellen Brown. And that's, you just simply go to itsourmoney.podbean.com, and you'll see all of our programs described there. And then, of course, the Public Banking Institute.org. PBI has got quite a considerable amount of resources, and there you'll also find updates on what's going on around the country, feeds, interviews, and they have a newsletter. Banking on New Jersey has a newsletter as well, and we'd be happy to sign you up and pull you into this community of conversation. Yeah. So.
Well, how's that for timing? It's 8:58.
All right. Thank you, everyone. This has been really informative, and look forward to hearing more.
Good. Sally, thanks for pulling this together.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you for joining us.
Our pleasure.
Our pleasure. Thank you very much. And if you'd like to be in touch with either one of us, Joan's address is Joan Bartle, B-A-R-T-L, at bankingonnewjersey.org.
New Jersey spelled out.
I'm sorry?
New Jersey
spelled out.
spelled out, not NJ. Yes, thank you.
And
Sally has all the, maybe Sally, you could coordinate this and send us everybody's email that would like to be on the mailing list, and pass along Walt and my email.
Absolutely. Yep.
Yeah.
and I'm simply Walt at Public Banking Institute, or Walt at bankingonnewjersey.org. Thank you so much, guys. I'm just delighted we are so happy to have a chance to connect with you. The power and your commitment to the work is something that we've honored through the years, and we were fortunate to enjoy. It was meaningful for us to participate with you guys in Newark, Black Lives Matter, about a year or so ago. But there's so much other work for us to do. So look forward to seeing you all again.
Okay, thanks everyone.
Thank you.
Good night.
Thank you.
Good night. Good night, Rachel.
Good night.
Night.